Our student speaker today, George Shardlow. Before coming to the Humphrey School, George was a community organizer, first with an economic development nonprofit in Baltimore, and then with the 2012 Obama campaign in the suburbs of St. Paul. George grew up in St. Paul before attending Luther College in Iowa. During his time at the Humphrey School, George interned with the Office of State Senator Ann Rest, and later the Minnesota State Council on Disability. He now hopes to work on helping marginalized groups get access to credit. Please join me in welcoming this year's student speaker, George Shardlow.
I'm the one guy who gets the hug, so just thank you, Dean, for that warm introduction. Friends, family, faculty, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to you today. Thank you for the support that you have given my colleagues and I. Special thanks go out to the partners in the audience, husbands, wives, boyfriends, and girlfriends. Thank you for letting us borrow your loved one. I can officially say you can have them back now. And I mean, don't get us wrong, they're lovely, but believe us when we say that we're just as happy as you are that they'll be spending next weekend with you rather than trapped in the basement of Humphrey working on a PowerPoint presentation with us. Before I begin, I want to share some information about our class gift. We managed to raise $1,016, exceeding our goal of $1,000. Not bad for a bunch of ramen eating grad students. I was talking to the husband of a Humphrey student, and he was saying how a boyfriend of another student had said to him, yeah, Humphrey people have the most depressing conversations. So to partners who've been dragged to happy hours and house parties and forced to endure our depressing conversations, I have good news. I have tried to write a happy, optimistic statement. Emphasis on tried. There are no guarantees here. Throughout my time at the Humphrey School, speakers came through to talk about gridlock and dysfunction in Washington. Those accounts have always been paired with a nostalgic homage to the bipartisanship of Hubert Humphrey and his colleagues. I heard these accounts so many times that I grew numb to them. Then one day I was walking on one such talk with a female friend, and she said, I'm so sick of hearing old white men talk about how great everything was when the world was run exclusively by old white men. Her comment woke me up. Indeed, why did Hubert Humphrey go to Washington in the first place? It's because while he and Strom Thurmond were helping each other get quorum, the teeth of police dogs were digging into the calves of African Americans peacefully requesting the right to vote. Our politics weren't less partisan, we were just better at shutting people out of the process. Even today, the U.S. Senate has 20 female members. Thank God, we can say that we are adequately representing the 20% of the American population that are women. Look, we had gridlock before Citizens United. We had partisanship before cable news. The ugliness began when those in the halls of power had to start reconciling their positions with those of individuals with fundamentally different epistemologies. They've done research on diversity. There are economists who will tell you that Countries that are more ethnically diverse have more conflict, lower productivity, and lower growth. But they've also done studies on project teams and shown that diverse groups produce better results. They're uncomfortable, they entail some conflict, but in the end, members of those groups expose each other to new ways of thinking. In the end, everybody's better off. And we can try to go back and say, oh, I wasn't being nostalgic for the racism or the sexism, but I think we need to ponder the possibility that some of that bipartisanship was made possible by the homogeneity of those occupying the halls of power. It matters. It matters how we tell our histories. So our task is not to go back. Our task is to create something new. I think there are internal impediments to that. I think there are external impediments. And I think there's reason for hope. First, we need to consider the internal impediments. Speaking for myself, the thought of creating something new is really intimidating. I think the Humphrey School tries to balance the need for critical analysis and the need for building concrete, productive skills. However, my heart goes out to the faculty because this program sort of self-selects for the rabble-rousers and gadflies. Half of us got impatient because we came to the Humphrey School to get concrete skills, and we were forced to sit through critical theoretical conversations. The other half was frustrated and felt we weren't nearly critical enough. But let's be fair. If we hadn't had those critical conversations, right now we'd just be preparing to go out and replicate systems that hurt the most vulnerable here in this country and around the world. And for those of us who craved those critical conversations, that's great. But now we need to go create something. Just speaking personally, I get self-conscious about the capacities I've cultivated within myself. And I worry that my capacity to critique outpaces my capacity to create. If I could go back and change anything about my conduct at the Humphrey School, I would self-impose a policy and say for the last 15 to 20 minutes of every class, I would only raise my hand if I were doing so to propose a solution. Lately, I've started finding great joy in surrounding myself with artists, musicians, landscape architects, creative people. I've found that they're not naive. They're aware of what's broken with this world. But they still find enough hope to plant trees, enough courage to create something new without knowing if it'll work, and enough love for the world in spite of its brokenness, to believe that it still deserves beautiful things. Now, there are external impediments as well. We see a nation that in truth has gone from being segregated by race to one that is segregated by race and class and partisan ideology. So when we see images of these kids in Baltimore protesting police brutality, and we say, how can they act this way? In reality, what we're saying is the same thing we were saying the entire time. They were trapped in failing schools, deteriorating neighborhoods, getting beat up by the cops. We are saying, that's not my kid. And why not say that? None of these kids look like the kids who live in our neighborhood. They don't look like the kids who go to our school, our churches, our synagogues. And I could make a moral appeal here, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to say objectively that I don't understand what we're doing as a country. I don't see where we think we're going. If we just keep digging moats around our balkanized little enclaves. I don't see how we close the skills gap in our workforce without changing our attitudes, preparing kids of color to be professionals rather than just prisoners. words of Hubert Humphrey, never give up on anybody. Instead, we see white middle-class families in eastern Baton Rouge trying to form a new city, just so they don't have to send their kids to integrated schools. I can't help but wonder what is so appealing to them about sitting on the nicest deck chair on the Titanic. The gridlock in Washington, that's just our reflection in the mirror. Now, I've got you real depressed, which is what I said I wasn't going to do. So now I'm going to share my reason for hope. The reason for hope is my deep and abiding respect and admiration for my peers. If ever there was a cohort of passionate, driven advocates, suited for the task of creating that power structure that actually represents this country, capable of articulating the need to see those kids in Baltimore as our kids, the one sitting before me now. So, we're going to go out and create those power structures. I don't really know how, but we're just going to start doing it. We're going to be critical, but just so we can fix what's broken. We're not pundits. We're the keepers of the hearth fires of hope. Thank you. Let's get to work.